Thank you for clicking on this video. This video is about the Affordable Homes Fund 2021 to 2026 CME. It's about bidding using our investment management system. This is video 2 of a series of 4 videos about bidding. This video will cover inputting, saving and validating a firm offer line. My name is Susan Roberts. This video was recorded in December 2020 and uses a version of IMS pre-release, so there may be that there's 1 or 2 changes that you see on screen. So what's in this video? So who is the video aimed at? Well, it's aimed at brand new users to IMS. I'm not going to assume that you know all the terms before. Would advise that you'd watch the first video, which is all about partnerships and offers and the structure that we have for bidding in IMS. I'm going to start off with some reminders from our Affordable Homes growth team about the bids that you're looking to put in the system. I'm then going to look at tenures, processing routes and milestones. Then move on to, in IMS, inputting a site, and then inputting a general needs affordable rent offer line. I'm then going to just look at the differences on other tenures and other processing routes. And some of that will be in IMS, some of that will be just via screen clips. I'm then going to move on to some common offer line, save and validate error messages to help you if you're getting any of those messages. I'll end off by a list of the other videos that are available as part of this series and as part of the Experienced Users series. Just to say that any data that I'm going to show you in IMS has been set up by Homes England specifically for this video and is not live data, so there are no data protection issues. So first, those reminders from my affordable housing growth colleagues. So first, all bids should be for firm deliverable schemes where details of the planned development are confirmed and costed, and you'll be asked for that information as part of your bid. Before you submit a bid, you should discuss your proposal with the relevant Homes England Affordable Housing Growth contact. If you don't know who that is, please email the inbox on screen and somebody will get back to you. We also expect you to have spoken to the local authority about your scheme and to be clear about how the scheme is meeting local housing need and addressing affordability. So first, tenures, processing routes and milestones. So in terms of this 21-26 programme, the tenures that are available under the programme are affordable rent, social rent, help to buy shared ownership and rent to buy. Now those of you that have worked with us previously will notice that there is no specialist rent listed here. That is because specialist rent could come under affordable rent or social rent. So you will identify your units as specialist rent units under the units details itself. So that's a change within IMS for anyone who's done that before. So IMS has a number of processing routes for each offer line that you input, and you choose the appropriate one for you. The table that's on screen shows you those processing routes and shows you the milestones across the top of the screen that could appear in IMS and identifies for each one which are relevant in each of those situations. Just to point out at the bottom, the lease and repair that has got a star after it, that lease and repair is only available under an empty homes offer line. Everything else can be bid for under all circumstances. So I'm not going to talk you through what exactly is in that table. If you want to look at it in more detail, please take a screen clip or pause the video at this point. So now to inputting a firm site in IMS, and that is our recommended way of inputting your offer line to input first the site and then to go in and to start to create that offer line. It should help alleviate some problems sometimes that users have. So next time you see my screen, I will be in IMS. So as in the previous video, I'm now logged into IMS and I'm logged on as an organisation user. And I'm going to go into the offers system so that I can look to input my offer line. So click on offers, then offers system. And I said the first part of entering an offer line was to enter your site. So let's click on the site button to do that. And click on OK. Okay, so at the moment there are no sites set up for this provider at all. So to add a new site, just like when I wanted to add my partnership and offer, I click on the blue plus button. Okay, it wants a description for my site. That description needs to be at least 10 characters in length. Okay, so I've called it video firmline site. It then wants to know the local authority. Now, if you try typing a local authority in there, it won't allow you to. It's expecting numbers in that box. But if you don't know your local authority code for our investment management system, if you right click, that will open up a query window. So I'm going to put in TAM and then click on find. Okay, so that has found Tameside. So let me click on that and click on OK. And that's now transferred it across. Now, everything else below that, in terms of the tabs, is greyed out. So let me click on the Save button. Okay, so that's now opened up everything else. Important thing to note at the moment is this status says incomplete. When we come out of this line, we want that status to be marked as complete. So is this a strategic site? The answer to this question is no for my site. If it was, asked to input information in the site. Is it brownfield or greenfield? Mine's going to be brown. Are they part of shopfront infill? No. It's not traveller pitch, that's already been completed for me. Is the site on green belt land? The answer is no. Are the procurement efficiencies that you're planning? So I'm going to select yes on this one. The list over here opens up and then I can click on any that apply. So if I go to the next tab, which is the geography tab, it now wants a 6-digit XY coordinate for me. Let me enter 6-digit XY coordinate. Okay, and then I'm going to click on the tab button. So when I've tabbed, what it's done is it's put up a message on screen. And what it's done is it's taken my XY coordinates, used the spatial intelligence system, and it's used it to work out whether it's a rural community or not. So provider rural classification says no. If for any reason that was incorrect, you can change that. The rural community is identified up here as well if it is a community, and the community size as well. So it wants a postcode in here. So if you only have a part postcode when you're bidding, that's fine to put that information in there. Later on when your development completes, you'll be able to enter the full postcode into the system. So let me click now on section 106 tab. And there are 4 questions on the section 106. Now, those of you that have been into sites before, you'll notice that there used to be more questions than this. These questions have been streamlined, hopefully a bit easier for you to answer. So if I were to select yes to the answer to the question 1, further questions below would open up. And you answer appropriately. But if you stick it or to put in no, then you don't get asked those other questions. So I'm now going to click save, but watch that status as I click save. Okay, so that site is now complete, and that means it can now be picked up inside an offer line. So you can make a note of the ID, or you can search for it later on. So let me click on the close button to get me out of there. And then on the line that says sites, click on the blue door with the red arrow to exit that window. So I'm now going to look at inputting a general needs affordable rent firm offer line in IMS. Okay, so once more back into the offers system of IMS, and what I need to do to start inputting is to click on offer line. A query window will appear. You can put filters on there if you want, or you can just click on the OK button. Okay, so you can see offer lines that I've started to set up under this partnership and an offer, and that's so that I can use these when I'm looking at some of the errors later on. So to set up a new offer line, I click on the blue plus. So partnership, click drop down. So I'm going to select the 2126. If I look at offer name, which is the next drop down, there is only one choice. And I then need to add an offer name. Now, like with the site, that needs to be 10 characters in length or more. Okay, so I've entered that information, and now I've got some questions over this side of the screen with some drop downs. So, is this site bringing empty properties back into use? The default is no. Is the scheme a hold scheme? The default is no. And then in terms of proposal type, we're entering a firm line. So let's select firm. And then the next tab that's available for me is the geography tab. And I need to input a local authority. Now, again, like on the site, this wants a numeric code. And this numeric code needs to match that's going to appear on the site. They need to be for the same local authority. So I can remember that code, it was 613. Okay, so then everything else is grayed out. So let me click on the save button. Okay, so that's automatically completed the region and the minimum geography for this firm offer line. So I'm going to ignore products for a minute, and I'm going to go to the last tab, which is site. And I'm going to add my site to this. So to do that, I click on the blue plus, and then I'm going to click on the magnifier. Okay, so this will bring up a list of all my sites. If I want to filter it, I can do so. I could put by a local authority and click on the magnifier to do that, or I can just select, in this case, the one that I know is the right one and click on the OK button. Okay, and then it wants to know how many firm units for this offer line. So that's 10. So click on the save button. Now, if you've got a site that you're putting under two offer lines, one for affordable rent, for instance, and one for shared ownership, you can use the same site for both of those lines. The unit numbers that we've put in here are tied to this offer line, not tied to the actual site itself. So let me go to the products tab. So this is where most of the information is going to be. So this is going to be an acquisition and works general needs scheme. So let me click on the drop down under processing route and complete acquisition and works. And then down the bottom of the screen on the offer line source, I need to select CME. If later on in the program you were doing a substitute, you would click on the substitute. Let me show you what happens when you do that. Another box appears for you to enter the offer line ID that you're substituting against. So let me turn that back to continuous market engagement and then click on the save button. Now, the next thing I need to do is to click on this blue plus. If I hadn't saved first, it wouldn't have let me click on the blue plus and go any further. So this blue plus is going to allow me to add my tenure, my sub-product name. So let me click on that blue plus. So it wants to know what the subproduct is, and it's a drop down. So it's affordable rent. It wants to know the number of units. So my offer line is going to be for 10 units. And it's going to be for £235,000. Okay, everything else is then greyed out. So let me click on the save button. Okay, so the tabs now have all become active. Now, my recommendation is that you work through these tabs in order. If you start jumping between adding data on later screens and earlier screens, what you will find is that when you save, IMS will identify inconsistencies in your data. So if you can, it's much better to add that data as you're going along and in the order of the tabs rather than jumping between them. So first of all, let's look at the organisation tab. So first of all, it wants to know, taking data from our partnership, which organisation is developing. Now you'll notice that the owners of land during development on this site has already been completed. If I click on that drop down, I can explain why. Okay, so in the partnership that I originally set up in video 1 for bidding, I only set one owner of land during development. But under developing organisations, I actually set up all 3 organisations that I was working with. So I'm going to select the first one of those. I then need to know who the owner of the units is. So that will be once the units are completed. So I'm going to click on the blue plus. I'm going to add in my same training provider 1. And I need now to remember to click in the units box and to add the number of units that the provider is taking. And IMS will later on pick up an inconsistency if the number of units doesn't match the number of units that are here. Okay, so down the bottom of the screen, there's now a question. Are you intending to work with SME contractors on this scheme? So yes or no. So I'm going to put a yes here. Now, IMS doesn't ask you for any further information at this point. Once the profiles part of IMS has been developed for the 21-26 programme, you will be asked to provide that information at the profiles stage of IMS. So let me go to my next tab along, which is the unit details. And I'm going to add a new set of units. So in terms of these units, you need a new unit line for each size of unit, each occupancy of unit, each capacity. So let me double click. And that opens a blank unit details screen for me. So it says, what type of housing does this unit provide? So it's either general needs, older people, disabled and vulnerable. I'm going to put general needs on this line and I'll come back to the others later on within the process. So it's already completed for me that it's not section 106 units. It's taken that information from the site that we added. It wants to know what the rent terms are. So this is affordable rent. So the number of units, I'm putting all of my units together. So it's 10 and it's a 3-bed, 5-person property. So the building type is a house. The facilities are self-contained. The works type is new build. Is it custom build? No, it's not. Then the next question has confused people in the past. The number of stories per dwelling. This is a house. We will always have a good idea of how many stories a house has. So never normally problems with a house. The problem comes when we come to flats. So we are not asking you the number of stories in your block of flats or apartments. We're asking you the number of stories for each individual dwelling. So for a flat, more than likely the answer to this question is 1. So next, let me go over to the accessibility. So it asks, does this unit meet the wheelchair standards? It's fine, regardless of whether you say yes or no. I'm going to select no for that question. So the next question down then is accessibility category of unit. And this is somewhere where IMS is going to be changing very shortly. So at the moment it says category 1, category 2, category 3 acceptable and category 3 adaptable. That will be changing so that there's one category 1, there'll be two category 2s, one acceptable and one adaptable, and a single category 3. That change may happen by the time IMS is released for inputting and once we've fully opened the program. So let me put on category 1, which means it's visitable by somebody in a wheelchair. Next question is, are these units intended to be used as move-on accommodation? Well, on this site, no, they're not. Down over the left-hand side of the screen, do these units incorporate design features to manage arrangements intended to meet the needs of a particular group? I'm going to put in no. If I'd put in yes, I would have had a drop down active down here to complete. So then it wants to know the internal floor area, and that is in square meters. So let me add that. We then have questions about whether the units meet all the national described space standards. If I put no, I'll need to answer then the questions below individually. If the correct answer is yes, then it automatically populates those yeses for me. So now let me move along to the rent tab. Okay, so just bypass that error. It's telling you this needs to be completed. So the expected market value for this unit, £145,000. And this one is an expected market value per unit. It's not grossed up or anything like that. And it is the value of the unit. It's nothing to do with the affordable rent or the market rent. So if I move, oops, too many zeros, just take one of those out. So then it wants to know the prospective rent per week. So that will be our affordable rent. And then our market rent in that area for similar units. Okay, so if target rent plus service charge exceeds 80%, there is a box for you to tick if that applies. But you'll see here, IMS has done a calculation and my prospective rent and the market rent it is exactly 80% this time. There's then a question at the bottom of the screen, and this will appear on all rental schemes. So, for any reason, are these homes considered exempt from the right to shared ownership? So the yes/no drop down. If you selected yes, you'll be asked to add some comments below. If the answer is no, set that and you don't get asked those questions. So now let me click on the save button and then the cancel button. So what this has done is it's transferred those unit details through to my table. And if you need to add more unit details, you just double click again and enter the second lot of units. So let me go across now to the design tab. So this is a new tab in IMS. So please indicate whether the design of your scheme meets the government's priorities for good design as set out in the National Design Guide under the 10 characteristics of. So these 10 characteristics, I select those that apply. Okay. Now there are two questions at the bottom of the screen that have been greyed out. And they've been greyed out because the first question is only asked on sites that are larger than 10 homes. So if you have got a site that's 11 units or more, you'll be asked the question whether you've assessed your scheme against Building for Life criteria, and it's a yes/no drop down. So if you answered yes, you'll then get asked the subsequent question about how many out of the 12 green lights have you achieved. So that's the drop down, and you select the appropriate number for that. So let me click on the capital contributions. I am at this point going to click on the save, because my recommendation is we've gone quite a bit, we've entered quite a bit of data under units, to click on the save button now. This would be particularly important on a shared ownership line, and I will repeat this later on. On a shared ownership line, we'd also have an additional capital contribution option, and that is initial first tranche sales, and that is added automatically based on information that you put it in to IMS under the units. So really important to get that information in there. So let me enter this information. So I've got some loans supportable from rental income. I've got some providers' own resources into the scheme. And we've got some recycled capital grants. Now, what IMS wants me to do is it will want me to put in a value for everything. So I need to put in zeros in the ones that I'm not putting a positive numeric value in. If I don't do this, IMS will come up with an error when I try and save and validate. Last one won't let me type in there, but it will let me double click on it. A new window appears. If I need to change any of these values, I can. And when I've completed, I click on the save button. And that has transferred the zero back to here. Now, there's a question that people often forget at the bottom. So of the above contributions, how much borrowing is intended to be used under an affordable homes guarantee? So if there is contribution, you add that here, but I'm going to put in a zero for my response. I'm going to move across to scheme costs. So the first thing it wants to know is, are these on public land? So they're not. It then wants to know what my purchase price was. I've entered that information. It wants to know, has it been marked down in my accounts? Okay, so then it wants to know, if I go further down, it's not asking me for acquisition costs, because what it says is acquisition cost and then brackets equals D. And that's why each of these are labelled, so that where data is moving forward, you can see exactly where that is within the system. So I now need to enter the works costs. So that is 1022,740. And then the on costs. So the on costs are 260. Okay, so that is everything that's been input there. Next, I need to go to scheme forecast. So this one is going to be all about dates. So it's important that the dates on this tab and the next tab match. So let me add a planning date, and that planning date was an actual date. Now, a couple of ways I can add that planning date. I can click on the drop down. So this one was the 2nd of March. Let me use the spinner. To move to March. Okay, and it was the 2nd of March. So let me click on that. And what I can see there is that that date is a Monday, so that's important for IMS. Click on the select. Okay, so you can see that that's transferred the date through. Now, that is a date in the past. So that was my actual achievement of planning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tick in there, because IMS doesn't like those lapsed dates. We'll see some lapsed dates later on that haven't been set as actuals. So next, my acquisition date, and I'm going to add that using the numerical keypad to add this. So the way I do that is I put in the number /5, and that will complete that date, and it'll change it to a similar format of date to above. So next, the start on site date, which is the 11th of the 6th, 21. That's when it's planned for. And then finally, our practical completion date, our final cost date, is going to be the 13th of the 5th. Okay, so now to my scheme progress tab. And as I said, the information that's here needs to be consistent. So let me just flip back. So we've already achieved planning permission, and that was the 2nd of March 20. So click on the drop down, and we've already granted it with no further steps. So click on that, and it wants to know the approval date. This needs to match. So that was 2nd of March 20. Come off it, and it's automatically changed the format of the date. It wants to know the land legal status. So this one is going to be the bottom one of those options. And the forecast date for completion is the 14th, 5th. Okay, and then it wants to know whether works tendering is up to. So I'm going to select works contract process not yet begun. Okay, so then I'm going to go to the additional information tab. There's a series of questions that need to be answered here. So the way that you would answer each question is to double click on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away and do that, and when you come back to my screen, I will have completed that information and be on the MMC tab. Okay, so I've completed the additional information and I'm now on the MMC tab. So this is new. So first question is layer 1, primary structure, and I select the appropriate option. So if it's not applicable on my site, that's the one that I would pick, or if it's not been determined. So I can put not determined at this stage. Okay, so then the non-primary structure, it asks whether it's not applicable, not determined, or that then there's 2 pre-manufacturing. So I'm going to select, again for my site, not determined as yet. I then, based on my options that I've selected here, don't need to complete layer 3. But if you'd selected other options, then you would have had to complete layer 3 as well. So I've now entered all the data that I need to under this offer line. So next, saving and validating your offer line. So to save, click on the save button. And what we're hoping is when we do this, that there are no errors. So let me click on that save button. Okay, the save button has gone grey and no messages appeared on screen. So it might be at this point that we got inconsistent date messages, or dates not a working day, and so on. So let me click on the cancel button. Okay, so now back to the main offer line screen. And the important thing to notice at this point is the data status says that it's invalid. Now this panics a lot of people, so we need to change that. And the way that we change that is by clicking on the validate button at the bottom of the screen, and IMS again will do some checks. Hopefully when I do that, it'll validate with no errors and the data status will go to valid and the box to green. So let me do that, click on validate now. Okay, so the offer line data validated with no errors. Okay, so I can now click on the cancel button. If I did want to go back and see the detail of what I'd entered at any point, I would go to the sub-product name and click on what becomes a hot link as when I go over it. So let me click on the cancel button. So just to point out, my line down the bottom here was a video demonstration AR line, and we've got a column that's called valid. You might be able to just see it's very faint because it's all in grey, but there's a tick against that video demonstration AR line, the line that I've just validated. Everything else has not been validated at this point in time. So now let's look at some of the differences if you were putting something other than a general needs affordable rent line in IMS. So first of all, the differences on a social rent offer line. Okay, the only difference is on the rent tab. And rather than being asked for market rent and expected rent, you're just asked to enter the rent per week, the prospective rent per week. You're still expected to add the market value in there. Okay, and that's the only change and only difference for a social rent line. So shared ownership line differences I'm going to show you in IMS because there are a couple in there. So let me go into, next time you see my screen, I'll be in IMS. Okay, so I'm now back in IMS in a shared ownership line. Let me go into the detail. Okay, so I've entered my first bit of data. I'm going to go to the units and I'm going to add those unit details in. So I'm going to add the first part of those myself, and when I've finished, I will restart the video and look at the shared ownership tab. I'm going to enter exactly the same data that I had previously. Okay, so I have now moved across to the shared ownership tab. So again, as previously, it wants to know the expected market value. Then it wants to know the assumed first tranche sale. So this value can be between 10 and 75% on this program. So let me enter the value 25. I don't need to put the percent in. IMS will work out that automatically. So what it's done in terms of the expected first tranche sales, that is a grossed up value across all units. It then wants a value for the prospective rent per week. So I've entered the value 57 and IMS has automatically calculated what that is as a percentage of the unsold equity. So then I'm going to click on the save button and click on cancel. Okay, I'm briefly going to go into that unit again. So just double click on it to open it again. I'm just going to quickly show you this one. So if I selected something other than general needs, I now get asked a question about older people's shared ownership, and then it'll want to know the category, but I'll come back to that one later on as well. So let me click on the save button and click on cancel. Okay, so there's one other thing that I wanted to look at on a shared ownership line, and that's when you go to the capital contributions. So initially, that is saying total initial sales income, and it's a zero value, and it won't let me click on that to add a value in there. The way that I get the initial sales across is to click on the save button. Okay, so I also get a mandatory message about amount pound must be specified. And that's about the rest of these values having been completed. But they're the two parts of IMS that are affected on a shared ownership line, the units and the capital contributions. And it's important that you click on the save button before you start adding values in here, because otherwise, when you click on save, those values will be wiped and you'll have to enter them again. So next, the difference is on a rent to buy line. So on a rent to buy line, the only difference is on the rent tab. And the tab that you get is for the same as the affordable rent line rather than on the shared ownership, even though rent to buy is a home ownership product. But that's the only difference that you'll find on a rent to buy line. So next I'm going to look at specialist schemes for both rent and shared ownership. So I'm going to open my affordable rent line from before and I'm going to make some changes to it. Okay, so the detail is under the products and then under the tenure, the sub-product name. Okay, so let me go first of all to my units and open up the unit information that's there. So what I'm going to do on this line is to change that general to, first of all, to older people. So what you'll see is that the revenue funding and the happy principles have now become active, but there's one other in the middle that currently isn't active. Let me click on one in the middle. And you can see the options that are here. If you want to see those in more detail, please pause the video. So let me select that top one, and that's fine. It hasn't opened up anything else for me. Let me click on the disabled and vulnerable people. And what that has also done is opened up the client group tab. So let me select a group and then let me move through these three new tabs. So let me go to revenue funding. So I'm going to identify F as NHS England. And as you can see, if you had revenue from multiple sources, you can select multiples here. Okay, if I move across to the next tab, which is client group, I can only select one from here. So let me select rough sleepers on this one. Okay, and then it wants the happy principles is the other tab. So for supported and specialist housing, please indicate whether the design of your scheme meets the happy principles on. So those are A to J, and you select as many as apply for you. And then when you've finished adding all that data, you click on the Save button. Okay, and that's taken me back to the Rent tab. So now let me come out of this line and go into a shared ownership line. So on my shared ownership line, I'm again going to go into the units. And those drop-down boxes work in exactly the same way as they did on the rent line. So older people, I get categories and I get more tabs. And on the older people, it asks are you using the older person's shared ownership model on the scheme? And that's either yes or no. Okay, so the revenue funding and the client group are happy principles, if they appear, would be exactly the same. For disabled and vulnerable people, I don't get asked the OPSO question. So they are the only changes. So next, off the shelf and ES, which stands for existing satisfactory differences. So there's a new question that's appeared on an off-the-shelf offer line screen, and that's on the opening screen of the offer line. Just past your offer line source, which should be continuous market engagement at this point, it asks, are these homes new build properties that were originally intended for market sale? And that's a yes drop down. There are also some other changes further on. So on scheme costs, you're not asked for the works costs, they've been greyed out. And you're not asked for information on the scheme progress tab. That whole tab is greyed out. So next, empty homes, and that's purchase and repair and lease and repair. And I'm going to show you those in IMS. Okay, so let me open my purchase and repair line and go to products and affordable rent. And then I'm going to go to the scheme progress tab because that's where the differences are. So the two items that were here previously have been replaced. First of all, let me click on the first drop down. So that's under property identification, and I'm asked, I've got three options to choose from. All properties in the bid identified, some properties identified, none of the properties have been identified. So I'm going to select the middle one, which is some properties. And then description of activity to identify remaining homes. So you'll enter a comment of at least 10 characters in there. And then, are any of the properties expected to be in mixed tenure blocks alongside private tenants or owners? There's a drop down there of unknown, yes and no. I'm going to select no on that option. So next, property acquisition. So there are three options. Purchase lease of all the properties in this bid have been completed. Purchase lease of some of the properties in this bid has been completed, and purchase lease is underway for all of the properties in this bid. So let me select the middle one, that it's been for some of them. So finally, I've got on the screen tendering status. So unconditional, conditional, tender for works is out to competition, works contracting process not yet begun. So let me select that one. And then are the works to properties expected to be of a level that will require planning approval? And that's yes or no. And that will impact on the scheme forecast tab. So that's all that you'd need to enter. So next, some changes that you will see on screen if you are an unregistered body. So there are two changes for unregistered bodies. The first one appears on the scheme forecast tab, and at the bottom of the screen, below your scheme forecasts, you will see a tick box. I'm intending to, in discussing my options, to receive a start on site payment for this offer line sub-product. Now, you will notice here that the payment is all on the final cost, and that will remain for an unregistered body until this is approved in the IMS system by our contracting team. Once it's been approved on your profile, so the later part of IMS, once your offer lines have been approved, then the payment will split in the way that it does for registered providers. The other change is on the scheme's cost tab. And one of those items, item J, is called transfer value. So if you're an unregistered body, then that box will become active as one of the boxes to enter data in. So they're the only two changes for unregistered bodies. So I'm now going to move on to looking at some common errors on saving and validating offer lines. And to help me with this, I've got an offer line set up in IMS that I've put multiple errors on, and we'll see those errors appearing and we'll look at dealing with them. So those typical errors come from data inconsistencies, and that can be date and units. So dates and units both appear in multiple places, and those dates have to be consistent. We've also got dates that are lapsed or actual dates not set, dates selected as weekends or bank holidays, scheme having a surplus or deficit, and also some missing information. So they'll come up as a mixture of under save and validate, I'm going to look at some examples of this now in IMS. So I'm now in IMS with an offer line that's called line with multiple errors, and it's an affordable rent line. So let's see what happens when I click on the save button. Okay, so you must specify at least one owning organisation. So click on the OK button. So it's only going to give me one error at a time, but I'm going to have to keep on saving until it comes up with them. So that's identified on the organisation that I've not put anyone in here. So let me put in the organisation and click on save again. Okay, so number of units must be greater than 0. So again, I should have added my units in there. So it should have been 10 units. So save again. Are you intending to work with an SME contractor? So miss that one out down at the bottom. Ones at the bottom often seem to hide. So I'm going to put no and save again. Amount pound must be specified. So that's going to be on capital contributions. So it's jumped me to capital contributions. Now, I identified when I was entering the data in the offer line before that it wants a value in every box. So let me put in 0, 0, and 0. And the bottom one, well, it won't let me enter anything. So let me click on save again. Amount pound must be specified. Okay, so it's highlighted this line. So it says other public subsidy, double click to enter values. So I've double clicked on it. I'm happy with those values. I'm going to save and it transfers the value 0 across. So let me click on the save button. So of the above contributions, how much borrowing is intended to be secured under an affordable homes guarantee must be specified. So click on the OK. So that's at the bottom of the screen. It's moved my cursor there. So I'm going to put a 0 in there and then click on save. Okay. So forecast planning date cannot be lapsed. Okay, so the planning date, I'm recording this on the 10th of December, was actually yesterday's date, is the 9th of December. So if it was an actual, what I should have done is put a tick in that box there. So let me save that. Okay, acquisition date must be a working date. Well, I found that the easiest ways for working dates is actually to click on the drop down. So I'd put that down as the 12th of December. I'm now going to put that as the 14th of December. And then click on save again. Okay, starting site should be a working date. So I've actually put that down as the 25th of December. So IMS knows when the bank holidays are. So let me go forward and let me change that to January. And let's put it in as Monday the 24th. Select and save. Okay, final cost date must be less than or equal to 31st of March 2026. So what I've done here is I've hit the long stop date for the program. So let's change that to the 31st of March 2026. And then click on the save button. Okay. Date by which further steps will be achieved must be later than today's date. So let's click on that. So this is all about the consistency of the dates around planning and land acquisition. So let me go back and double check those dates. So the planning was the 9th of December and it was an actual. So this one I'm going to change to detail planning approved and no further steps. Okay, and the approval date, I need to make the date consistent, was the 9th of December. So that's the 9th of the 12th, 20. Okay, so let me click on the Save button. Forecast date for acquisition must be later than today's date. Okay, so what did I have on my scheme forecast? Acquisition was the 14th of December. So I need to change that to 14. Save. Okay, so at this point, IMS hasn't given me any further errors. So it's found quite a lot as I was doing them, as you'll have seen. So it's now I'm now going to close that. I'm going to go back to my main screen. I'm going to try and validate this offer line. Now I know that there are still some errors within this offer line, which should come up when I validate. Okay, so there's an error that's appeared, and I'm going to go through these. It showed me them all at once. There's a list of them. I'm going to do these one by one. So total scheme costs, so total capital contributions plus transfer value and so on must be 0 for the subproduct. Now there's an error reference. That error reference is actually just the subproduct line. So I can click on that error reference and it'll take me to it. And if I go to my scheme forecast, sorry, my scheme costs, what I will see is that I've got a surplus or deficit on that scheme. So what I actually did on this one is I needed to put a 0 in there. There's a digit missing. But if that's a surplus or deficit, the values that you need to check are in funding requested, capital contributions, and scheme cost to check that all those values are correct. So let me click on Save and Cancel. Okay, and what that's done, by doing that Save and Cancel, it's taken me back and it's automatically revalidated the line for me. Okay, so the next one doesn't have a reference on it. So it says the firm site entered does not equal the total subproduct units for the offer line. So let's click on Close. So this offer line says it's got 10 units on it. The site says it's got 9. So the only way that I can fix this is to delete it and re-add it with 10 units on it. So click on the delete. Are you sure? Yes. Site successfully deleted. Then I'm going to add it again. Look for it. I only had one there, so click on that and OK. And this time I'm going to put the correct number of units in there, which is 10. And then click on the Save button. And then I'm going to go back to geography and I'm going to have to this time revalidate. I wasn't in a loop that it would do it for me automatically. Okay, so still got 2 errors. The offer line cannot be validated until additional information screen has been completed. So that is this tab here. So let me go and enter some data here and then save again. Okay, when I've entered that information and saved it as I went and I clicked on the close button, it's completed that information for me and has automatically revalidated for me. This time there's only one error. This time the error is the required MMC tab question has not been answered for the subproduct. So let me click on the line. Let me go to MMC. And I can see I've not completed that information. So let me quickly complete that information. So select one on each. And let me click on the Save button and cancel. Okay, so now the offer line has validated with no errors. Click on the OK button. It's valid and everything has been sorted. So hopefully that has given you a flavour of the sort of errors that you will get potentially as you're entering data. So I've picked up some of the most common ones, I think, in what I've done, and that gives you an idea of how to sort those errors out. So next, the other videos that are available. So the 21 to 26 bidding videos have been split into two categories, which are on different playlists within YouTube. The first one is aimed at new users. The second playlist is aimed at experienced users. So there are going to be 4 new user videos, and I'm working my way through creating those videos as I'm recording this one. So the video 1 is about bidding introduction, so how IMS is structured. It's also about entering your partnership and offers into the system. This video 2, was about inputting a firm offer line and site. Videos 3 and 4 are going to be much shorter, and 3 is about inputting an indicative offer line, and video 4 is about validating and submitting your 21 to 26 offer in IMS. And what about if you need to go back and do any changes? For experienced users, there's a single video, which is an video upgrade from the 1621 program, which shows providers the differences between the screens for the two programs.